My own daughter tried to manipulate me to get me out of the house where I built my life. All to pay for the mansion of her dreams with her husband. I am a 63-year-old man who has lived most of his life in a small suburb of Kansas. My name is Michael. And this story begins more than 3 decades ago when my wife Evelyn passed away unexpectedly. Evelyn was the love of my life. An incredibly cheerful and charismatic woman who lit up any room she walked into. We had a daughter, Chloe, who was barely 5 years old when a brain aneurysm took her away from us. Those first years after the loss of Evelyn were the hardest of my life. I worked as a mechanic in a local workshop, which was not only physically exhausting but also barely left time to mourn and take care of Chloe. But I always managed. Every night, after long days of work, I would sit on the couch with Chloe and read her bedtime stories. In those moments, the world seemed a little less bleak. As Chloe grew up, I tried to give her everything I could, even if it meant sacrificing myself. She was never a troublesome child. She was smart, funny, and had a dream. She wanted to be an architect. I made sure. She called me frequently to ask for advice or just to tell me about her classes. It was in her final year when she first told me about her boyfriend, Liam. According to her, Liam was brilliant, ambitious, and most importantly, he made her happy. I didn't have the chance to meet him in person until Chloe's graduation. And although at first, he seemed like a nice boy, there was something about him that I wasn't fully convinced about. But like any proud father, I ignored it and hoped that Chloe would find in him the love that Evelyn and I had shared. After graduating, Chloe and Liam moved to Dallas, where they both found well-paying jobs. Chloe got a position at a prestigious architecture firm, and Liam started working in finance. I was happy to see her so fulfilled. But something began to change. The phone calls became more sporadic. And when we finally talked, I noticed that Chloe seemed more distant. I attributed this change to her busy work life and tried not to worry too much. However, my perception changed drastically about a year ago when Chloe and Liam came to visit me. It was the first time they brought their 3-year-old daughter, Juliet, for me to meet her. It was a bittersweet moment. As I hugged my granddaughter, I couldn't ignore the coldness in Chloe's eyes and the fact that Liam barely spoke to me. During dinner, Liam mentioned casually that they were considering moving to a bigger house in an exclusive neighborhood in Dallas. Chloe looked at him and smiled. And then, with the greatest naturalness in the world, she told me, "Dad, we've been thinking. You're already retired. And this house is too big for you. Have you considered selling it and moving to something smaller?" The suggestion took me completely by surprise. My house was not just a property. It was the place where Evelyn and I had raised Chloe, where every corner was full of memories. I calmly responded, explaining that I had no intention of moving. Chloe nodded, but the sparkle in her smile faded. I didn't hear much from them for weeks after that visit. Soon after, the real chaos began. I received an email from Chloe explaining in more detail why they thought selling the house was the best for everyone. According to her, I could get good money for the property and move into a comfortable apartment, while they could use the money from the sale to cover part of the down payment on the mansion they wanted. I thought it was a misunderstanding of some kind of confusion and decided to call her to clarify it. But what happened in that call left me frozen. "Dad, this is the best for everyone," Chloe said with an impersonal tone that I had never heard before in her voice. "I don't understand why you're so attached to that house. It's just an old structure. Liam and I could really use that help for our family. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word echoed in my head like an endless echo. How could my own daughter, the same girl for whom I had sacrificed everything, consider me selfish? It was at that moment that I knew that what was coming wouldn't be easy. This wasn't just a simple family discussion, it was a battle for something much deeper, my dignity and the memories that house represented. After that call with Chloe, I felt as if the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. 4 days. I couldn't help but go over and over our conversation in my head, trying to understand how my own daughter had come to think that way. Had I failed as a father? Had I been too indulgent in raising her? Every corner of my house. From the old sofa where Chloe and I watched movies on Saturday nights to the kitchen table where I used to help her with her homework. Made me feel the weight of her rejection. I tried not to think about it anymore. But Chloe and Liam didn't seem willing to drop the matter. 2 weeks after that call, an email from Liam appeared. This time much more direct. In it, he described the financial benefits of selling my house, detailing how I could live more comfortably with the remaining savings while helping my only family to prosper. The message was full of numbers and arguments, as if he were writing a work report. But what really hurt me was the way he ended the letter. Michael, this is not an emotional decision, it is logical. Chloe and I need your help. And we are sure that as a father, you will want to do the right thing. The right thing. It was as if they were questioning my love for Chloe and Juliet, insinuating that if I didn't agree, I would be a bad father and grandfather. Although the email was addressed to me, I felt that they didn't even see me as a person but as a financial obstacle on their way to their dream mansion. That weekend, Chloe called me. Her tone was sweeter, as if trying to soften the conversation. She told me about how much Juliet had grown and how much they wanted her to have a bigger playroom and a yard to run around in. She mentioned that they wanted to organize family gatherings in their new house. A place where, according to her, we could all enjoy it. But it wasn't long before she brought up the issue of selling my house again. Dad, we don't want to pressure you. But Liam and I have spoken with a real estate agent, she said with a chilling lightness, as if she were talking about what to have for dinner that night. They told us that you could get an excellent offer in this market, we can even help you find a good place for you. Something inside me broke at that moment. I told her clearly that I was not interested in selling. That this house was my home. The place where I had built my life with Evelyn and raised our family. I thought that would be enough to stop her. But instead of understanding, Chloe became frustrated. Dad, you have to understand that this is for the good of everyone. It's not just about you. I hung up the call before she could say anything else. My heart was broken. The girl I had taught to ride a bike, whom I had comforted after every fall, was now treating me like a burden. However, it wasn't the end. A few days later, something much worse came. I was in my front yard watering the flowers when I saw a car I didn't recognize parking in front of my house. Chloe and Liam got out of it, accompanied by a man in a suit carrying a clipboard. Without warning, they began to walk around the property, pointing things out and talking in low voices. I went out immediately to confront them. What are you doing here? I asked, trying to stay calm. Liam answered before Chloe, with a forced smile and a condescending tone. Michael, this is our real estate agent, Joe's. We just wanted to assess the property in case you change your mind. I'm not going to change my mind, I said, raising my voice for the first time. This is my house, and it's not for sale. Chloe approached me, trying to calm me down, but her voice had a hint of impatience. Dad, we don't want to fight. We're just exploring options. You have to understand that this is for the best. I looked at my daughter, at Liam, and at the real estate agent and realized that I had no allies in that fight. Chloe and Liam weren't listening. And worse, they were acting as if they had already made the decision for me. After that encounter, things got worse. They started calling me almost daily, insisting on the issue. Sometimes it was Chloe, sometimes Liam, and each time their arguments became more aggressive. On one occasion, Liam even suggested that I was being irrational and that my attachment to the house was a sign that I needed help accepting the changes in life. The most painful thing came one night when I received a text message from Chloe. It was a cold and distant text informing me that they had consulted a lawyer to explore their legal options regarding the house. I felt as if I had been stabbed. How could my own daughter resort to legal measures to take away my home? After reading that message, I decided to seek help. I called my old friend Nathan, a retired lawyer who had worked with me in the workshop for years before changing careers. Nathan, upon hearing my story, was horrified. Michael, they can't get you out of your house without your consent. This is emotional and financial abuse, he told me with a determination that gave me some hope. Nathan offered to help me review any legal documents that arrived and to face whatever came. For the first time in weeks, I felt that I had an ally. What I didn't know was that Chloe and Liam were not only willing to use the law to pressure me, but they also had a much more intrusive plan in mind. A few days after my conversation with Nathan, things started to take an even darker turn. I was starting to feel calmer, having someone on my side. But Chloe and Liam didn't seem willing to give up. One Friday morning, I woke up early as usual, ready to enjoy a quiet breakfast in the kitchen. But when I went out to the porch to pick up the newspaper, I found something that left me speechless, a for sale sign planted right in my front yard. I stood there paralyzed for a few seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. I ran to the front to examine the sign more closely. It was professional, with a contact number and the logo of a real estate agency. My mind was racing a mile a minute. I couldn't believe that Chloe and Liam had gone that far without even telling me. I quickly went into the house and called Chloe. Her phone rang several times before she finally answered. And her tone was carefree, as if she had done nothing out of the ordinary. "Hello, Dad. How are you?" she said, as if she didn't know why I was calling her. "How am I?" I yelled, unable to contain my anger. "There's a for sale sign in my yard. Do you have something to do with this?" There was a brief pause before Chloe responded, this time with a more defensive tone. "Dad, we were going to tell you. Liam and I thought it was time to take action. You can't keep clinging to that house forever, it's time for you to think about the future." "The future?" I replied, my voice trembling with fury. "This isn't just a house. Chloe, it's my home. And you have no right to sell it." "Dad." Technically, she began to say. But I interrupted her. "I don't want to hear anything else. If you don't take down that sign immediately, I'm going to call the police." I hung up before she could answer. I was trembling with rage and pain. I never thought that my daughter, my Chloe, would go this far. I called Nathan immediately and explained what was happening. His response was reassuring but forceful. "Michael, we're going to take action. That sign doesn't mean they can legally sell the house. They can't do anything without your consent, even if the title is in their shared name. But you need to be prepared to fight this." Nathan arrived at my house later that day to help me draft a formal letter to the real estate agency demanding the removal of the sign. He also began to investigate if Chloe and Liam had signed any contract with the agency without my knowledge. Meanwhile, he suggested that I start documenting everything: photos, emails, text messages, anything that showed their behavior. That night, while I sat in my old armchair with a cup of tea, my phone began to vibrate non-stop. They were text messages from Chloe and Liam, each one more insistent than the last. Chloe said that I was acting like a child and that this was for the good of the family. Liam, on the other hand, was much more direct, accusing me of being selfish and of not wanting to see them prosper. It hurt me to read those words, but I decided not to respond. I knew that anything I said would only fuel the conflict. The following days were a nightmare. Chloe and Liam started showing up at my house unannounced, bringing the real estate agent with them. They would knock on the door, and if I didn't open it, they would walk around the property, pointing things out and taking photos as if it were already theirs. On one occasion, I saw them walking through the backyard while talking about the possibilities of remodeling. It was the last straw. I stormed out to the backyard and confronted them. "This has to stop right now," I yelled, pointing my finger at them. "You have no right to be here." The real estate agent, a young man in his 30s, stepped forward with an uncomfortable smile. "Sir, I understand that this may be stressful, but your children are just trying to find the best solution for everyone. The best solution for everyone would be for you to get off my property right now," I replied. Liam stepped forward, with his arms crossed and an arrogant look. "Michael, if you don't cooperate, you're just making things more difficult for yourself. Do you really want to ruin our relationship over this? You're the ones who are ruining our relationship, I replied, feeling my voice cracking with emotion. This house is all I have left of Evelyn. Of our family. How can you be so insensitive? Chloe, who had been silent until that moment, finally intervened. But her words only made things worse. Dad, I know it's hard for you. But you have to understand that this is not just about you. It's for Juliet. For our future. Your future. I said with a bitterness I couldn't hide. And what about mine? What about everything I sacrificed to give you this future? The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe and Liam didn't know what to answer. They finally left. But not before Liam muttered something about talking to the lawyer. That night, while I sat alone in the darkness of my living room, I felt completely defeated. Everything I had built, every sacrifice I had made for Chloe, seemed to have evaporated. But as I looked at the old photos on the mantelpiece of Chloe with her mother, of the three of us in happy moments, something inside me changed. I wasn't going to let them take away my home. After that last confrontation with Chloe and Liam, I realized that I couldn't afford to give in even a single step. My home was more than four walls, it was the heart of my life. A refuge of memories that I had built with Evelyn and maintained for Chloe. If they were determined to fight, so would I. Nathan intensified his help. We gathered all the relevant documents, including the property title and records showing how long I had lived in the house. Although Chloe was technically a co-owner since she turned 18. A gesture I had made naively thinking about her future security. Nathan explained that as the main resident and considering my contribution to the mortgage payments and maintenance, I had rights that they couldn't ignore. The tension intensified when I received a formal letter from Chloe and Liam's lawyer. In it, they stated their intention to proceed with the sale of the property, citing that as co-owners, they had the right to liquidate their assets. The letter also implied that my refusal to cooperate was irresponsible and contrary to family well-being. Nathan assured me that they couldn't act without my consent and that that letter was nothing more than an attempt to intimidate me. The situation reached a critical point a few weeks later, when one morning I woke up to the sound of voices outside my house. Looking out the window, I found a group of strangers walking around the inside and outside of my property, while Chloe and Liam guided them as if they were organizing an open house. I stood there frozen for a few seconds before reacting. I quickly went out to the porch and yelled at them. What the hell is going on here? This is my house. You have no right to be here. The visitors, clearly uncomfortable, quickly dispersed. But Chloe and Liam remained in place with the real estate agent. Liam was the first to speak, with that same condescending attitude that drove me crazy. Michael, we're just exploring possibilities. This is inevitable. It's better that you start thinking about the future and cooperate. Cooperate? I shouted, my voice trembling with anger. You came onto my property without my permission and are trying to sell it behind my back. Is this how you treat your family? Chloe finally intervened. But her tone was not conciliatory. It was cold and calculated. Dad, no one wants to hurt you. But you have to understand that this is for the best for everyone. We already spoke with a lawyer. And we know we can proceed legally if you don't cooperate. It was as if I had been punched in the stomach. My own daughter was threatening to evict me from my home. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the lack of remorse in her eyes. That night, I sat down with Nathan to discuss the next step. He was as outraged as I was. But his legal mind was focused on finding a solution. Michael, we need proof of all of this. Every unauthorized visit. Every text message. Every call. I want you to document everything. This is not only a legal matter, but also one of emotional abuse. We can use this to your advantage. I followed his advice to the letter. I bought security cameras for my house and started recording all interactions with Chloe and Liam. I also saved every message and email I received from them. It was painful, but necessary. A few days later, Nathan and I filed a lawsuit to protect my rights as a resident and co-owner of the house. We also sent a cease and desist order against Chloe and Liam, warning them that any further action to sell the property without my consent would be illegal. The lawsuit and the cease and desist order seemed to stop things. At least temporarily. But Chloe and Liam didn't give up. Instead of confronting me directly, they started working in the shadows. Rumors began to spread through the neighborhood. Neighbors with whom I had shared years of friendship began to avoid me. And some even looked at me with pity or distrust. It was then that I knew that Chloe and Liam had been telling people that I was not fit to live alone and that it was time for me to move to a safer place. It hurt me deeply. They were not only attacking my home but also my reputation. I decided to confront some neighbors and explain the truth. Most were understanding. But some seemed to have bought Chloe and Liam's version. I felt lonelier than ever. The lowest blow came one night when I returned home after a meeting with Nathan and found an envelope in my mailbox. I opened it to discover a copy of a real estate listing with my house included. There it was. With photos of my living room, my kitchen, and my garden. Along with a description that said, "Spacious home perfect for a young family." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They had listed my house without my consent. I called Nathan immediately. And his response was swift. "This is illegal. Michael. They can't list the property without your signature. This will look very bad for them in court." The situation was wearing me down physically and emotionally. I started losing weight. And my nights were filled with insomnia and anxiety. Every time I heard a car parking in front of my house, my heart would race, fearing that it was Chloe and Liam with more strangers. In the midst of all this chaos, I received an unexpected visit. An elegant and serious-looking woman introduced herself at my door one afternoon. She said she was Elizabeth, Liam's mother. Although I was suspicious at first, I invited her in. What she told me that afternoon surprised me. "Michael, I can't stay silent watching what Chloe and Liam are doing. This is not right. And I want to help you." Elizabeth explained that, although she supported her son, she didn't agree with his actions or with Chloe's. She offered me her support and, more importantly, a possible solution to end this nightmare. Elizabeth's visit took me completely by surprise. Until then, I had only seen her in a couple of family gatherings. Always distant but polite. I didn't expect anyone so close to Liam to intervene in my favor. We sat in the living room. And Elizabeth, with a mixture of discomfort and determination, began to speak. "Michael, I know we haven't had many chances to really get to know each other. But I want you to know that I'm here because this worries me deeply. I've seen what Chloe and Liam are doing. And I can't stand by. I wasn't raised to be indifferent to something so cruel." I took a sip of coffee while processing her words. My initial distrust began to fade as I saw her genuine distress. "Elizabeth, I appreciate you being here. But I don't know what you can do. I've already taken legal measures. But Chloe and Liam don't seem to understand reason." She nodded, clearly aware of the gravity of the situation. "I want to help you keep your house. Liam and Chloe have taken this as a war. But there are ways to solve it without you continuing to be a victim of their greed." Elizabeth went on to explain her plan. She and her husband, Robert, had been planning to give Liam a considerable amount of money as part of his early inheritance. Enough for the down payment on the mansion that he and Chloe so desired. But now, she was willing to use that money to buy the part of the house that belonged to Chloe. "If I buy her part, Liam and Chloe won't be able to use it against you. You'll be the sole owner. And they won't be able to keep pressuring you to sell," she told me in a firm tone. The offer took me by surprise. It was certainly a practical solution. But it also made me feel a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I could keep my home. But sadness because we had reached this point through the intervention of an outsider. And not through the empathy of my own daughter. The following days were full of legal consultations with Nathan, who was optimistic about Elizabeth's proposal. "Michael, this could be the best way to resolve this without spending years in court," he told me. "It's a solid and legally protected offer." Elizabeth and I scheduled a meeting with her lawyers and Nathan at his office to discuss the details. It was a long meeting, full of legal terms that often seemed incomprehensible to me. But at the end of the day, we had a preliminary agreement. Elizabeth would buy Chloe's share and transfer full ownership of the house to me, on the condition that I wouldn't sell it for the next 5 years. When the deal was signed weeks later, I experienced a mixture of relief and exhaustion. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of Chloe and Liam's pressure begin to lift. However, Chloe and Liam's reaction was not long in coming. As soon as they learned of the agreement, Chloe called me furious. "How could you do this? You've betrayed us," she yelled over the phone. "Betray you?" I replied, my voice full of disbelief. "Chloe, do you hear yourself? You and Liam tried to take away my home, the place where I raised you. And now you accuse me of betrayal for protecting it." Chloe didn't answer immediately. After a few seconds, she simply said, "I can't believe you chose Liam's parents over your own daughter." She hung up before I could say anything else. It was at that moment that I knew that our relationship would never be the same again. With the deal finalized and Chloe and Liam out of the equation, peace slowly returned to my life. But it was not the same peace I had known before all of this. There were deep wounds that would take time to heal. I kept in touch with Elizabeth and Robert, thanking them again and again for their generosity. In many ways, they had become the family that Chloe no longer seemed to want to be. Months passed, and although the house once again felt like a refuge, the echo of Chloe's absence was undeniable. I tried to focus on positive things, taking care of the garden, reconnecting with old friends, and slowly rebuilding my life after this emotional battle. One day, almost a year after all of this ended, I received an envelope in the mail. It had no return address, but when I opened it, I found a photo of Juliet, my granddaughter, along with a brief letter written by Chloe. It said, "Dad, I know what we did was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that Juliet will always ask about her grandfather, and I would like her to be able to meet you someday." It was a simple message but laden with meaning. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to decide if I was willing to let Chloe back into my life. For now, all I could do was look at the picture of Juliet and hope that someday the wounds that this struggle had left could heal. At least enough to rebuild something that resembled a relationship.